In this video, I will show you how to set up and configure a modern TypeScript Node.js application. I have been developing Node.js services and microservices for a while, and often we need to review our setup as technology and tools evolve. While frameworks like Next.js, Remix, or even Vite come with a TypeScript, linting, and even testing tools pre-configured, Node.js backend application require a manual setup. Today I'll guide you through configuring TypeScript Node.js project for development. We will start by setting up TypeScript and Jest testing framework. Next, we will add ESLint and Prettier to ensure code quality and consistent formatting. We will automate pull requests to run tests and linting, and use Nodemon to automatically restart project during development. Since many Node.js projects need to interact with a database, we will add Sequelize ORM or Object Relational Mapper. Let's get started. I am in a folder, Node Template 2024, and it is an empty folder. Let's go ahead and initialize Node.js project. We'll do npm init-y. This created package.json file. Let's go ahead and install other dependencies. First, we're going to install TypeScript, TS Node, types for Node, and add tsconfig Node 20. And this is TypeScript config base for Node 20. Let's go ahead and hit enter. Now let's go ahead and create tsconfig.json file. So let's do code tsconfig.json. We're going to paste the following code in there. We are going to use an extends property, and it's going to extend Node.js 20 tsconfig.json. Let's click into it and see what it does. So it references the schema, and it says that the version is 20.1.0, and then it has compiler options. It uses libes 2023. The module is Node 16, and the target is ES 2022. It enforces the strict mode, and it also puts ES module interoperability to true. So that means we can import common JS modules using import. Does skip lib check true, and then it sets module resolution to Node 16, the same as the module. tsconfig base can be pretty useful in setting up TypeScript project, and as a matter of fact, there are several TypeScript bases for several projects. So let's take a look at how to find them. So let's switch to the browser. You can type in Google search TypeScript handbook, and then you click on the TypeScript handbook right here, and in the left bar you click on a project configuration and click on what is a tsconfig. And right here you have an article, you'll see an overview, and then you're going to find tsconfig bases. Here we have an example of setting up Node.js 12 TypeScript project. However, Node.js 12 is a little bit outdated, so you can click right here on github.com tsconfig bases, and it's gonna lead you to a GitHub repository, and you click on a folder basis, and here you can find bases for all the projects, right? We're using Node.js 20 because it's a current LTS, long-time support or long-term support, but you can also use Node 21 and Node 22. You can see Next, React Native, Next, Ember. So when you're setting up your project, so consider using these bases. All right, let's go back to our project. Back in tsconfig of our project, we're going to be building on top of tsconfig base. In the compiler option, we'll put out directory to dist. The root directory will be src. We're going to force consistent casing in file names, so we don't have issues with files named with the uppercase and lowercase letters. In include, we're going to put all the files from the src directory, and exclude, we'll put node modules, and this directory, there we don't need type checking. Now let's go ahead and configure Jest. We're going to be installing the following dependencies: Jest, ts-jest, and types for Jest, and also we'll be using --save dev. Our dependencies are installed. Let's create jest.config.js file. We'll do code jest.config.js. Let's go ahead and put the following code in there. So this is a JavaScript file, so we're doing module.exports a common JS, right? And we have a configuration object where we're using Jest preset. We use environment Node.js, and we define root directory as tests. Also, we're going to be telling Jest which files to transform, right? And we're going to be transforming .ts or .tsx files. We're not going to have tsx files, but just in case, we can just leave it as is. Next, we're going to have a regular expression to find the test files, right? It's going to be .test or spec, and again, ts or tsx. And finally, we're going to be using the following file extensions to recognize in module resolution. Now let's jump to package.json file, and we can add some scripts right here. We are going to be using tsc for build. We're going to be using Jest to run the tests, and in our jest.config, right, we're going to be looking for these files. And we're going to be doing test watch. We're going to be running Jest with a watch flag. Now let's go ahead and create an example function. We're going to be doing code src, and we put utils.ts. So we created utils file in src folder, and let's export function. We'll call it add, and we're going to have a, b, and we're going to have a simple return a plus b. So this function will add two numbers. And as you can see, a and b are underlined, so it looks like our TypeScript kicked in and telling us that we need to actually put some types here. So let's put a as a number, and then b as a number as well. And you can see the error went away. Now let's go ahead and create tests for that function. We're going to create a file. It's going to be in a tests directory, so tests add.test.ts. And we're going to put the following code in here. We'll import add from utils, and we're going to do add 1 plus 2 equals 3. And we're going to have expect add 1, 2, right? Calling the function with 1 and 2, and the answer should be, or result should be 3. Let's go ahead and save it. The last thing that we need to do is actually add an tsconfig.js file in tests folder. So it's going to have its own tsconfig, because, if we, for example, create a function here, right, we can do function, and we can call it my function. We're going to pass it a parameter a, and then we're going to return a. As you can see, a is not underlined in red or anything, right? It doesn't tell us that, hey, add is any, right? And we cannot have a as type any. So TypeScript is not checking types in our test. And that is why tests folder needs its own tsconfig file. So let's go ahead and do code tests tsconfig.json. And in tsconfig file in tests folder, we're going to just simply put the following extends, and it's going to be using Node.js 20 tsconfig base. So let's go ahead and save it. And now you can see that the TypeScript is also checking our test files as well, right? Now a is underlined in red, so now it tells us, hey, you need to put the type, right? And let's put the type as string, and then the error goes away. All right, we can remove this my function here. Let's go ahead, save the changes, and now we can run npm run test to make sure everything is working. We have one test and it's passed, and everything works. This is how you set up your Node.js project with a TypeScript and Jest, ensuring that your code is type safe and well tested. I am in a Node Template 2024 project. I have TypeScript configured and Jest configured for testing. If you're in the VS Code, be sure you have ESLint plugin installed. So just type ESLint, and you're going to have this plugin, so be sure you have it installed. Now let's go ahead and install ESLint in the project. We're going to be doing npm init at ESLint config at latest. It's going to ask us a couple of questions. So we do want to check syntax and find problems. What are we going to be using? We're going to be using actually a common JS, require exports. Are we going to be using any frameworks? We're going to put none of these. Does your project use TypeScript? We're going to say yes. Now it asks us, where does your code run? So here we're going to be running in the node. So we're going to put arrow down and check node, and then we're going to go up and hit spacebar again to uncheck browser. Let's go ahead and hit enter, and it's going to ask us if we would like to install the packages, and it asks if we want to use npm, and we're going to say yes. When ESLint is installed, it tells us that some plugins currently do not support ESLint v9. This is where ESLint uses flat config. And it tells us that we may want to use --force when installing packages, or add overrides ESLint 9.6.0 to package.json. So let's go ahead and do that. In the package.json, we can add overrides ESLint 9.6.0. Let's go ahead, save it, and close it. After ESLint is installed, it created eslint.config.mjs file in the root of our project. But before we go through this, let's go ahead and look at ESLint config documentation. So in the Google, type in ESLint config, and you're going to have this configure ESLint pluggable JavaScript linter. Click on this link, right? And it's going to talk about configuring ESLint and ESLint configuration file. So let's go ahead and look at a configuration file format. And right off the bat, it's going to tell us here that this is a new flat config file, and the previous file that we used to is deprecated. The documentation tells us about the file formats right here, and basically the configuration file exports an array of configuration objects. And here we can take a look at the configuration object properties, and important one is files, and that it says that it's a array of global patterns indicating the files that configuration object should apply to. And if it's not specified, and this is kind of important, configuration object applies to all the files matching by any other configuration object. Ignores property is an array of global patterns, including the files that configuration file should not apply to. So there is no .ESLint ignore anymore. There is ignores property. And then again, important is if ignores is used without any other keys in configuration object, then the pattern acts as global ignores. Language options is another important property. You're gonna mostly configure their source type, your globals, probably parser, but built-in ESLint parser is pretty good. And then you can specify ECMAScript version. ESLint suggests to use the latest, but you can use whatever version you like. Another property that you're going to be frequently using is rules, and it says that it's an object containing the configuration rules, and when files or ignores are specified, these rule configurations are only available to the matching files. This is pretty cool because you can apply rules to specific files. Now let's jump to globally ignoring files. So here it's pretty straightforward. As we mentioned before, global ignores is basically only one ignores property, and it also explains how you're gonna define the patterns in here. And node modules and .git, they're ignored by default. Now let's take a look at a cascading configuration objects, right? When more than one configuration object matches a given file name, the configuration objects are merged with a later object overriding previous object when there is a conflict. So you got to be here careful. However, sometimes it's going to be beneficial, or most of the times, because you can apply specific rules overriding the rules for a broader range of the files. And in this example, we can see that we have all files right here, right? And then the tests files in this object. So basically, when the tests objects are linted, the globals, my custom global read-only will be applied, and then the globals it and describe will be also applied to these test files. Now let's go ahead and jump to using shareable configuration package section, and it says the shareable configuration is an npm package that exports a configuration object or array. So if a package exports configuration object, you can just put it in the array of the configuration objects. If it exports an array and you have to check with that package, you're going to be doing the splat. And this is basically a crash course on ESLint config. If you would like to learn more, so check out this documentation. It's actually pretty cool stuff here. Now let's go back to the VS Code and let's take a look at ESLint.config.mjs file, right? It's MJS, so we do export default. The first configuration object contains just files. The next configuration object actually contains another set of files, but it says .js, so it's narrower files list, right? And when it says .js, we're gonna apply language options as common JS. So for example, if we have a Jest right here, right, it's JS, and we want to say that we want to apply common JS here. So the next thing, we also have another configuration object that has language options, and it uses the globals for a node because we are working in Node.js. And then we have plugins, right? And we're using plugins JS from ESLint itself, and we're using recommended configs for this. You can also use .all, so all the configs, but in our case, we'll just use recommended. And also we are importing TSLint from TypeScript ESLint. And in this case, TSLint exports an array of configuration objects rather than just one. And like I said, you have to check with a ESLint TypeScript documentation, right? And therefore, we're going to use the split operator ESLint configs recommended. Now let's go ahead and update this configuration to match our project. So in the files, all right, we're going to put the following. We're going to be ignoring, and it's going to be a global ignore, and we ignore the dist folder, right, where our project is going to get built. Also node modules, right, they need to be ignored. However, they're ignored by default. In the object that contains files, we're going to put the files that we are interested in, right? Files in src and files in a test folder. And we're going to be mostly using JS and TS, JSX and TSX. I just put it in just in case. And then we will also keep language options as is, and then plugins, JS from ESLint recommended, and TypeScript recommended configuration as is as well. So TypeScript is taken care of. Let's take care of Jest. Let's install the following, right? We'll do npm install ESLint plugin Jest with a flag --save dev. ESLint plugin Jest is installed. Let's go ahead and update ESLint config file. We're gonna do import Jest from ESLint plugin Jest. And then we can define specific configuration for our test file, right? So Jest config flat recommended, right? It is exporting config object. However, since we're putting it inside the configuration object to apply to the test files, we're going to split it out. And then in the rules, we're kind of splitting out the same. And then we do Jest prefer expect assertions. We're going to put it as off. Let's now take care of the Prettier. And again, if you are in VS Code, so be sure you have a Prettier plugin installed, right? So it's right here, Prettier code formatter. Now let's actually jump into Prettier docs, Google Prettier docs, click on anything, and then from the left-hand side, choose integrating with linters. The Prettier recommended way of integrating with a ESLint is basically just turning off the rules that conflict or unnecessary with Prettier, right? So, and you're going to be using ESLint config Prettier for that. However, some people, like me, they would like to run Prettier as a linter rule. Now, it's generally not recommended, but I still kind of like it. We can just kind of use lint command, and then, you can kick in Prettier as well. So I would going to be doing also ESLint plugin Prettier. So if you click on that, and its documentation basically going to tell us that you're going to be configuring this plugin, and when you do that, it will also enable the ESLint config Prettier. So let's jump to VS Code and install the following. we're going to be doing npm install with a save dev flag. We're going to do ESLint plugin Prettier and ESLint config Prettier to turn off the rules. Now we're going to install Prettier library itself, and it is recommended to install the exact version of this library. Now let's go ahead and add Prettier to ESLint config. We're going to be importing ESLint plugin Prettier recommended from ESLint plugin Prettier recommended. The documentation suggests to put ESLint plugin Prettier at the very bottom, so it will override any conflicting rules. Let's go ahead and save it, and we're all set. Again, if you're working in a VS Code, you gotta make sure you also go to settings and do default formatter. You need to select it as Prettier for your editor. And you also may want to use format on save, right? I like to do that, so we'll just do format on save, right? You gotta make sure you checked it here. Now let's go ahead to package.json file, right? And we're gonna create another script right here. I'm gonna call it lint, and we're gonna put ESLint. Now let's go ahead and run this script. We'll do npm run lint. And you can see we got a bunch of errors. And as you can see, we also got mostly Prettier, right? Our Prettier got integrated into linter, and I kind of like that. Let's go ahead and run npm run lint, and we will put fix option right here. And now everything fixed, right? So everything is looking good. So let's go ahead and do a little bit more testing, right? Let's create some code to make sure our configuration works. In the src utils, we can create the following. We can put const object, and it's going to be hello world. And then another thing that we're going to put is let c equals to, let's say, 7. Let's go ahead and save this file, right? And as you can see, most of the things got fixed because we have format on save. Now let's go ahead and run npm run lint again. And as you can see, we have error. The object is assigned a value but never used. That's the object. And then we also have c is never reassigned, so we need to do prefer const. So let's go back to ESLint config. And right here, we can create another configuration object. We're going to put just one property rules in there. And this will be also an object. And what we're going to do, we're going to put a TypeScript ESLint, no unused vars, and we're going to turn off this rule. And go ahead, save it, and the Prettier is going to take care of the formatting for us. Now, let's go ahead and run npm run lint again. And as you can see, now we only have one error, and it says prefer const, right? And we actually want to follow that rule, right? We don't want to turn it off. So let's go ahead and do const. Let's save it. Let's run npm run lint again, and we are all good. If you would like to level up your web developing skills, please check out this course on Coursera by IBM, Developing Backend Apps with Node.js and Express. This is an intermediate level course, and it will teach you how to create server-side applications using Node.js. You will learn how to use npm package manager and extend your Node.js application with the third-party packages and frameworks. And you will get a better understanding of asynchronous callback functions and promises. This course consists of 4 parts. You're going to get introduction to server-side JavaScript. You'll do asynchronous callback programming. You will learn how to install and use Express in Node.js. And finally, you get to do a project that you can put it in your portfolio. Please check out the course. The link is in the description. It is an affiliate link, and I might get a small commission if you use the link. If you do use the link, thank you very much. It helps me to continue making more videos. I am in Node.js project where I have TypeScript, Jest, ESLint, and Prettier installed. In order to automate code review with the GitHub Actions, we're going to do the following. Define workflows in .GitHub workflows. Each workflow consists of one or more jobs, which contain steps that define the tasks to be performed. Trigger events. Each workflow is triggered by various events, such as code pushes, pull requests, issues, and more. In our case, we will be triggering a workflow on pull request into main branch. Run actions. Actions are individual tasks that can be executed as a part of workflow. You can use actions from GitHub Marketplace or write custom actions using JavaScript and Docker. Let's go ahead and create lint and test workflow. We are going to be creating it in .github workflows folders. So let's go ahead and do code.github workflows. And now we will do lint and test workflow. And the extension will be YAML or YML. And in this file, we're going to put the following. We're going to name workflow lint and test workflow. The trigger will be on pull request into branch main. And we're going to do the following, right? We have jobs here, and we'll just define one job, lint and test. The name of this job will be also lint and test. It's going to run on Ubuntu latest. In the strategy matrix, we're going to put node version 20.9, and we're going to define the steps. So we're going to use predefined actions to check out the repository. The next step, we'll set up Node.js. We'll give it a name, Node.js with a version. It's going to use predefined action setup node v3, and it will define node version from the matrix. Next, we're going to run npm install CI, and CI means clean install. So it's going to take package log.json and install dependencies from there. Then we're going to do npm run lint, and finally npm run test. Next, we're going to add pull request checklist, and we're going to put this checklist in a .github folder. So we're going to do code.github, and then we're going to do pull request underscore template.md. And let's go ahead and put the following checklist in here, right? So we're going to have checklist for the code following the styled guidelines, non-commented out code or debugging statements, right? If you update documentation that is necessary, such as README file or env.example, you edit tests and no sensitive information. Now we're good to go to create a Git repository and push it to GitHub. But before we do that, let's create a .gitignore file. We'll do code.gitignore. And in the gitignore, we're going to put node modules, dist folder, and .env file. Obviously, as your project progresses, you're going to put some more files in here. Let's go ahead and initialize Git in our project. So we'll do git init. Next, let's add the files and create the first commit. So we'll do git add, that means everything. And we're going to do git commit with message initial commit. Now let's go ahead and switch to the browser, and we're going to create a new repository in the GitHub. We're going to call it node template 2024. Okay, and we're just going to hit create repository. So let's go and copy the remote right here. And our branch is already named main, so we don't have to do anything. Or if your branch is master, you can rename it into main using this command. And then we're going to push our code to the GitHub repository. So in the browser, let's paste the following. And now we'll do git push -u flag, because it's the first push. We'll put origin main. And our code is in the Git repository now. Let's switch to the browser and verify it, right? If we go to node template, we can see that we have a repository. Now we can actually go to settings and make this repository a template. All right. And right now, let's go ahead and check if our workflow is working, and we can see the checklist. So all we need is to create a PR or pull request into the main branch. In the VS Code, we're going to create file readme.md. And in the file, we're going to put the following. We'll do template for Node.js project. Obviously, you can add some more things in here, what you have installed and everything else. Let's go ahead and create a new branch, git checkout -b readme file. All right, and now let's do git add and git commit with a message added readme file. Now let's push our code to the repository. So we'll do git push origin readme file. And the branch got created, so let's switch to the browser. And right here, we already have readme file and compare and pull requests. So Git is really good about it. And as you can see, we have pull request checklist already available. So let's go ahead and create a pull request. And then we got this checking for ability to merge automatically. The lint and test workflow kicked in. As you can see, the checks have passed, so we're all good to merge. However, if our tests fail, it won't really prevent us from merging. But we want to set the rule where, well, we will need a review, for example, for a pull request, and we want our checks to pass before even this pull request can be merged. You can click here. Git is very helpful on add rule right here. And then you can go and do the create a rule set. You can also do that from obviously settings and branches, right? So if you go to the branches, it used to be classic protection rule, and it's actually still there. You can add it as a classic protection rule, but now GitHub introduced branch rule sets. So let's go ahead and create the branch rule set. We're gonna give this rule set name PR into main branch. We can enable this rule set. Let's configure bypass list, and usually you'll get bypass to admins, right? So they can merge. If something goes wrong or something, you need to merge the request and override the rule. Admins can do that. In the targets, we can specify the target branch. We can put include default branch, right? And main is currently the default one. Or we can do include by pattern. And in the pattern, we can simply put main. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the rules. And GitHub already helps us, right? It checks the restrict deletions and block force pushes. We're also going to check require pull request before merging. And we're going to have required approvals. We're going to set to 1. So pull request should be approved. And then we're also going to check require status checks to pass. This is going to be our automated PR checks. And we're going to search for lint and test. Right, and right here we have a lint and test. So let's go ahead and check it. And now we're gonna click create, and our rule set is created. Let's go ahead back and take a look at the PR. And as you can see, merging is blocked because there is a review is required. So, and I cannot merge it right here. If the automated checks had failed, it would have been the same thing, right? We wouldn't be able to merge it unless you're an admin or something. So let's go ahead and head back to the settings. Let's go ahead to rules and rule sets and PR into main branch. We can just go ahead in the require pull request for merging. We can uncheck it for now. So, and we'll click save changes. We'll go back to the pull request. Add readme file. Now the checks have passed and I can merge this pull request. Let's go ahead and merge this. As you can see, GitHub Actions is a powerful tool that helps automate different parts of software development. It makes life easier for developer and teams by simplifying their work process and keeping their code quality high. If you consider this video helpful, please like and subscribe to our channel to help YouTube recommend it to more viewers. I am in Node Template 2024 project. I have it configured with a TypeScript. Let's go ahead and do npm install. We're going to install Nodemon and .env CLI. Nodemon is obviously to automatically restart our application while we're developing. .env CLI will load environment variables from .env file. And we're also going to have -- save dev flag. So we'll save those dependencies as a dev dependencies. Now let's create Nodemon configuration file. We'll do code nodemon.json. And let's put the following code in here. We're going to have JSON file with a watch, and we're going to be watching SRC folder. Our extensions will be JS, TS, and JSON. We're going to ignore files, and we're probably not going to have those files, but just in case, if we have the test files in the SRC repository, we're going to be ignoring them. And our command that we're going to be executing will be TS node, and we're going to run the file index.ts in SRC folder. And TS node library we installed when we configured TypeScript. Let's go ahead and save it. Now let's go ahead and create a .env file. We'll do code.env. And we're going to put the environment variables called app debug, and we'll make it true. Let's go ahead and save it. We can actually copy it, and then we're going to create also .env.example file. So for people who are working with us, they can know what variables they can put in there. And we can put app debug, and we don't necessarily have to have the value. We can just remove it if they want to do in debug mode, they can enable it. Now let's go ahead and create index.ts file in SRC folder. So we'll do code src index.ts. And also in the SRC folder, we have utils.ts file that exports function add, and it just adds 2 numbers. So let's go ahead and do console.log, and we put add, and we put these 2 numbers, let's say 1 and 2. And we need to import add function from utils. Let's go ahead and do import. We'll do add from utils. Let's go ahead and save it. Also, let's go ahead and console log our env variable, right? So let's do console.log. We're gonna say debug, and we're gonna say process.env.app debug. And we can also put just some right here so we know what we're console logging. Now let's go to package.json, and we can add a dev script, and we'll just simply put Nodemon. All right, let's go ahead and save it. And now let's do npm run dev. And as you can see, our sum is 3. However, debug is undefined. And the reason for that env variables are not loaded from the env file. Let's go ahead and cancel out. In order to load env variables from the env file, we need to use .env CLI that we installed. Let's go ahead and update the dev script with a .env. We'll put .env space -- space. Let's go ahead and save it. Now let's go ahead and run npm run dev. And as you can see, our sum is 3, and then debug is true. So let's go ahead and test if our application restarts automatically. Let's go ahead and put, for example, 3 here instead of 2. Let's save it. And the app indeed restarted, and now our sum is 4 and debug is true. Let's talk about process env. It is a global object that gets you access to environment variables. Although it is useful, using it directly in your code like I'm doing right now may lead to serious issues. In smaller projects, you may get away with a sprinkling process.env around your code. However, in larger projects, this can get out of hand pretty quickly. A better way is to have a centralized place where you can put your environment variables. This place can be a configuration module. Let's create one. src. So we'll put /config.cs. And let's put the following code in there. Const config. And we're going to have an object here, and we can put app debug. And we can do process.env.app debug equals to true, the word true, because environment variables are strings. So if we want to have a Boolean, we need to really compare it to the string that we want to. And finally, let's go ahead and do export default config. Encapsulating your environment variables like that have several advantages. Well, first of all, you have a single source of truth, right? So if a new developer joins the project, they can look at this configuration object and see what environment variables they need to put in their local.env file. You also have an advantage of maintainability. For example, if you decide to change the environment variables from app-debug to debug, you don't have to jump around the code and update all the occurrences of app-debug to debug. You can just simply update it in your configuration module. Also in configuration module, you can do configuration transformations and assign defaults. As we've seen right here, right, we actually need app-debug to be Boolean and not string, so we're kind of casting it to Boolean by just comparing this value to the word true. And we can also assign defaults. For example, env can be process.env.node env, or the default value can be development. Right, we can also do transformation and assign default value at the same time. For example, port, we can do parse integer, and we'll do process.env.port, or we can have string 3000. As you can see, you can encapsulate all your logic in a configuration module. With a configuration module, you also get consistency and readability. For example, let's say app-debug, it may not be kind of readable. We can just call it debug. And then when we go ahead and use it in the code, we can go ahead and import config from config, right? So we'll do import from .config. And now instead of process env app debug, we can do config dot, and you can see we have a hinting right here what we can choose, right? That's another advantage. So we'll just put debug in here, and then we don't have to compare it to true. Obviously, we can just delete that. Okay, and our code is way more readable. Another advantage that configuration module gives us is separation of concerns. Your code shouldn't care how your environment variables are retrieved. This logic should be encapsulated in the configuration module. So right here, we're getting database config, right? There is a function, and that's where we're getting configuration variable or environment variables for the database. All you have to do now is just to call this function in your code. Finally, configuration module helps us to test easier, right? We can mock our configuration. Let's go ahead and run the test. We'll do npm run test. As you can see, the test is passing. However, we don't see app debug console log statement because usually environment variables are not imported when you run tests because you may run them in a different environment, let's say on a kind of different server in a GitHub Actions. However, if you would like to use them in your tests or maybe debug something, right, to see what's going on, you can easily mock them in your tests. Let's say when running this test, it's failing for some reason and we want to see the debug console log statement. We can just do jest mock and just get this configuration module and mock out the debug variable and put it to true. Let's go ahead and run the test again. And now you can see the debug console log statement, right? Calling add function with arguments 1 and 2. By avoiding direct use of process.env, you can enhance your code security and maintainability. Let's go to the browser, just type in docker mysql in the search, and you can find right here the first MySQL official image, the Docker. So if you scroll down, you're going to have the line of code that you can use to start your Docker container where you have MySQL. So let's go ahead and copy, and we can go back to VS Code. Let's go ahead and make this window a little bigger. Let's go ahead and paste the code, and we need to make some changes. In the name, we're going to put MySQL-DB. We also need to add port. We'll do 3306. This is our host port, and our container port will be 3306 as well. That's the port MySQL runs on. Right here, we have MySQL root password. We will keep it just secret. And then we also have MySQL tag right? But instead of tag, we need to put an actual tag, right? So we'll put latest. Let's go ahead and run it. And it looks like we got an extra $sign. Let's go ahead and fix it. And run it again. I already have an image, so I didn't pull an image here, but if you don't, it will pull the image automatically and will start the container. And now you're going to have a database server running on the port 3306. Let's go ahead and switch to a table plus. I already have connection configured right here. If you click on edit, you can see I have a MySQL local. I have a host, local host, right? 3306 my port. The username will be root and the password will be secret, right? So let's go ahead and test. Connection is okay, and then we can connect. So in Table Plus, right here on the very top, you can click the Show Databases icon, or you can simply do Control key or Command key, and then you have the schemas that we have. So let's create a new one. We'll call it just simply My Blog, and we'll leave everything as default. Click OK, and now we can open this database, and obviously there is no tables. Let's switch to VS Code and open a .env file. So in this file, we can add database configuration variables. The name of the database will be my blog. The username is root, password is secret, host is going to be localhost or 127.0.0.1, and the port 3306. Let's go ahead and save it. In the previous video, we created a configuration module where we created a property, which is a function that basically gets these environment variables: db name, db username, db password, db host, and db port. We will be using it to configure connection to the database from Sequelize ORM. Since we're using TypeScript in our Node.js project, we need to install Sequelize TypeScript. Let's go ahead and switch back to the browser. And here we can just Google Sequelize TypeScript. And let's go ahead and go to Sequelize TypeScript. And you can see that they're still working hard on making Sequelize a breathe to use TypeScript. And some parts are still at work, and you can use Sequelize TypeScript package. It also tells us to install at types.node. If you scroll down, you can see how to use Sequelize with a TypeScript, and you can see it's pretty verbose. So I do prefer to use Sequelize TypeScript. I think it's the API here is a little bit more, readable and less verbose, and it tells you how to install Sequelize TypeScript, right? So you'll need to install it types.node and a types validator. And I do think we have types node installed already. So we'll just need to do the types validator. It also tells you to install Sequelize, reflect metadata, and Sequelize TypeScript. Finally, it tells you to use target ES6 or higher. And then you need to put experimental decorators true, enemy decorator metadata true, and all this thing you need to put in your config.json file. Let's go back to VS Code. Let's take a look at the package.json. In our dev dependencies, we already have at types.node. So we only have to install at types validator as a dev dependency. Let's go ahead and do that. Now we need to install Sequelize dependencies. And besides Sequelize, reflect metadata, and Sequelize TypeScript, we also need to install MySQL 2. Is actually going to be the driver that's connecting to MySQL. Now let's open tsconfig.json file, and it extends tsconfig node 20. Let's jump in there, and as we can see, the target is ES 2022, which is higher than ES6. So we're good in here. All we have to do is in the compiler options, we'll add experimental decorators true, enemy decorator metadata as true as well. Now let's go ahead and create database connection file. So we'll do code src db connection.ts. Let's go ahead and put the following code in here. We're going to be importing Sequelize from Sequelize TypeScript, and you're going to be careful to actually import it from Sequelize TypeScript and not Sequelize. We're also going to import config from our config module or config file. Then we're going to call getDatabaseConfig method on this config module, and we're also going to be using the split operator because this get database config returns an object, and we need to put the properties of this object in Sequelize configuration object. We also will need to add dialect, which will be MySQL, and we're going to tell that the models will be in the models folder. Let's go ahead and create our first model. It's going to be a simple model. We'll name it person. So let's do code src models person.ts. Since it's a model, we capitalize the first letter. Let's go ahead and put the following code in there and take a look. We are importing optional from Sequelize. We also import decorators from Sequelize TypeScript, and those decorators are table, model, column, data type, created at, updated at. We are going to be using more strict in a TypeScript sense model definition, so we're going to be using interfaces here. So there will be, first one will be person attributes, and it will be have ID and name. We will also have another interface that's called person creation attributes, and this will extend the optional type, and the optional type will basically tell TypeScript that ID is an optional. So meaning in order to create a person, you will just have to put a name because ID will be created automatically by the Sequelize. So now we have a table decorator, and here you can describe the table. I'm telling that the timestamps are true, and the table name will be persons, plural, and a model name is person, with a capital P. Now we're going to define and export class person, and it's going to extend model, and it's important, right? So you need to extend model, and we're importing it from Sequelize TypeScript, and we put person attributes and person creation attributes as generics in here. So the first will have a column ID, and we'll have a decorator to tell Sequelize that it's a primary key. The type will be data type. We're going to just use UUID. However, you can use big integer, unsigned, and auto increment. And then the default value will just say UUID before. Next, we're going to say declare ID of type string, and we're going to have to use declare right here so TypeScript doesn't emit ID again. The next column will be name, and all it will be is just data type string. Again, we will declare name as string. Next, we will add timestamps, and we will use decorator at created at and at updated at, and the values will be created at and updated at. The types will be date, and I'm also using underscores because I like underscores as my created at and updated at timestamps. And you also don't need to say that those are optional, right here. You don't need to put them in the optional attributes because Sequelize, or rather Sequelize TypeScript, kind of understands that they're not needed when you're going to be creating a person. Let's go ahead to index.ts file, and right here we want to import Sequelize or our connection and our model person. So now we need to create the table for that model, and the way you can do it in Sequelize, right? You can do Sequelize .sync. However, this is an asynchronous action, so we either need to put .then or use await, right? Let's use await. And in Node 20, you cannot really use await in the main file, so we need to create IFI, or immediately invoked function expression. Let's go ahead and put the parentheses here and invoke function. So we'll put async, and this is going to be the function. And let's go ahead and move our code inside this IFI and save. So right now we can run npm run dev. And as you can see, we have a log right here, and Sequelize in the development mode, it logs by default. So you can change this by putting logging. Right here, there will be a property, so you can change that and define the logging. It should be a function, so double check the documentation for that. But anyways, like I said, we got log right here that we're executing first. It's actually checking if the table exists, right? And it doesn't exist, so it created a table. Now we restarted the server, and now it ran and checked again for the table, and it said a table exists, so we don't need to create a table, so Sequelize didn't create the table second time. Now let's go ahead and update the code to create a person, right? We'll put person.create and we'll put an object here. And like we said, ID is optional. We don't need to put it in. Well, we can't put it in really because Sequelize will take care of it. We'll just put name, and then we'll put, let's say, Alex. Let's go ahead and make changes. And as you can see, again, Sequelize checked if the table exists, and it does exist. And then what it did, it showed us that it's executing a query to insert persons with ID and name, created at and updated at in the database table. Let's go ahead and create another person. We can do John, for example. Let's go ahead and save. And Sequelize also created John in the database table. Let's go ahead and switch to Table Plus to verify that. We have to refresh first, and then we can see that we have a table, persons, right here. It's a little bit small, so let me make it a little bigger here. So we have 2 records, right? One John, one name. We have created at and updated at timestamps, and we also have ID, and this is ID is UUID assigned by default by Sequelize. We've covered a lot, from configuring TypeScript and Jest to adding ESLint and Prettier, and even automating tasks with GitHub Actions and Nodemon. Remember, keeping your code clean and maintainable is key, and those tools will help you to achieve that. If you found this video helpful, please click like and subscribe to our channel for more tutorials like this. Don't forget to check out our videos on advanced topics like Sequelize migrations and best practices for using environment variables. Your feedback and support help us create more videos to help you on your development journey. Happy coding!